And so I was dealing with this guy who was moving a lot of coke from the Colombians to the Hells Angels. So he was like the intermediary. And he was also an intermediary for all their money. And this guy, he was an ex-SQ, an ex-Quebec police officer, Sûreté de Quebec. Anyway, I ripped him in the end for $3 million. I think it was $3 million. And as it is in the drug business, the Colombians said, "We're very sorry to hear that you got ripped off. That's terrible, the police, but you still owe us $3 million.
Hello and welcome to a Matter of Fraud podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Ferguson, Associate Lawyer at Investigation Counsel. This podcast is brought to you by Investigation Counsel, fraud recovery lawyers. A brief disclaimer for our audience. Although we talk about fraud law and fraud adjacent topics on this podcast is not legal advice. If you have been or think you have been the victim of fraud, please contact a fraud recovery lawyer as soon as possible to preserve your rights.
Welcome to another episode of a Matter of Fraud podcast. Today I'm joined by Chris Mathers, a great friend and an esteemed colleague. So before we get started, I'll just give everybody a little bit of background about Chris Mathers. Chris is a former RCMP officer. I understand 20 years, multi-decade with the force. And when Chris was with the RCMP, he headed up their proceeds of crime section, including a lot of undercover work where Chris worked alongside the FBI, USDEA, other international organizations. And then Chris moved on to head KPMG, the accounting giant's corporate intelligence unit, where Chris advised international clients on issues like due diligence, crime risk, consulting, etc.
And fashion, too.
Always. And that's not all. Chris is also a best-selling author. Chris's book, Crime School, Money Laundering, is really a deep dive into Chris's experience in all things organized crime, fraud, money laundering, etc. And it's a great book and a
great cure for insomnia too.
No, it's actually really entertaining, and so we'll get into some info that's in the book later. And right now, Chris operates his own consulting business, which is actually how we know Chris, or how I know Chris. We work with Chris on some of our cases to provide consulting or expert evidence assistance to some of our cases, and that is really important to us. So in Chris's role as a consultant and expert, Chris has been designated as an expert before the courts of Ontario, including the Superior Court, the Federal Court of Canada. And Chris's evidence is, crucial to us in our cases where we're seeking Mareva injunction or asset freezing type orders, or Anton Pillar or evidence preservation orders, or even of Norwich Pharmacol, which are the production of bank record orders. And really, Chris's evidence and information, his wealth of experience, we tap into here in our cases to help persuade the court when necessary that we need these type of extraordinary orders. So Chris is able to, using his background and his knowledge, help us persuade the court that we need certain things, because not all judges are, experts in fraud. Sometimes they haven't even dealt with a fraud case before. And so the more information, the more context, the more, experts that we can bring before the court to help show what's happening and what relief is necessary in a specific case is really crucial. And so with that, thank you, Chris. Thanks for being here. I know. Well, your resume is really, really long. So thanks so much for being here and for your time. I know you're a busy guy, jet setting all around the world. I understand you're on your way to Dubai
I am.
shortly.
I'm speaking at the first IT security anti-fraud conference put on by the UAE Institute of or Internal Auditors Association, it's called. It's also being jointly sponsored by the certified fraud examiners from the U.S.
Right.
So they've invited me over to do my thing. So I speak on AI and crime these days.
Right.
I do a lot of research about AI and the impact of AI on fraud, which is profound.
Right. So that was one of my questions, later on in our chat. Before we get into it, I just wanted to kind of pick your brain a little bit about what, if anything, is there a specific moment or a specific experience that really spurred your interest in financial crime or led you down a certain path?
I think that in the police, we were primarily interested in drug enforcement. And when I was, quite young, it was more about chasing drug dealers up and down the street. But as you grow older and gather more experience, you start to realize that it's just about the money and nothing else.
Right.
And then people talk about legalization of marijuana and all this. We don't really care about that. It's a commodity that organized crime makes money off of, whether it's legal or not. They make money off it, and they usually do illegal things to unfairly compete with other people if it's a legal commodity. So I fairly early on, I realized you got to follow the money.
Right.
And so then I was drawn towards the whole money laundering aspect of it, and I established these fake businesses for the government here and in the United States so that we would launder money for drug traffickers. And we were quite successful at it, actually, at laundering for the criminals.
So when you were doing that undercover work, what did your day-to-day look like? I mean, you talk about in the book a little bit that you were required to, as part of being undercover, kind of cloak yourself in this gangster-like persona.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it depended on who you're dealing with, right?
Right.
But primarily what we did was we tried to portray ourselves as businessmen, but businessmen who were bent,
Right.
who would do anything to make a dollar. And so, my typical day in those days, we had a variety of offices and companies that we'd set up for various things. And a typical day would be going into the office.
Right.
And everybody in the office was a RCP officer or an IRS or, depending on where we were, be different, federal agencies. And we would just have a list of what's going on today, who's coming in today, which bad guys are coming in, because we had a lot of things going on.
Right.
And a lot of our undercover people who were doing other cases would bounce off our office as some kind of, almost a form of legitimizing themselves. They say, we're going to go and see my friend. He's got an office, down on Bay Street. And they'd show up.
Right.
And, quite often we had this technique, which was kind of really weird, like if you're into psychology anyway. So this friend of mine was trying to get into these guys for the credit cards. Big organization that was involved in a lot of huge credit card fraud. But he really couldn't get them to start saying the things that they needed to say for him to gather evidence.
Right.
So, being amateur psychologists, I said, okay, bring him into the office, and we're sitting in my office having a cup of coffee and we'll meet and greet, and start talking a little bit about the bad stuff you're doing with him, and I'm going to shut you down. So he said something about cards. I said, well, don't talk about that stuff in my office, okay? And the bad guy was like, oh. I said, take it down the hall, do your thing, and then come back, we'll talk some more. So the two of them got up and went down the hall and had a really good conversation. For some reason, it was the right thing for this Chinese dude. It impressed him for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. But we just did that on a flyer,
right.
just for fun.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that, for the people on the outside, it's this big undercover thing. But for you, it's your daily job.
Yeah. And
so it's just what you do every day. And you're always trying to come up with new stuff. Sometimes just stuff to keep people from being bored.
Right.
like more Chinese dudes. We were moving stolen cars for these Chinese organized crime. And so I'd never met these guys. We went to meet them. And it was my buddy who was the contact. And so going in the door, I got this idea in my head that I wasn't going to talk to them, that they would say stuff and I would whisper in my friend's ear and he would talk. just being stupid. Right?
Yeah.
But these dudes, they're like, oh, that guy's smart. He doesn't want to say anything to incriminate himself. And I did this for like half an hour. Afterwards, my partner said, what the hell are you doing?
Yes.
I don't know, just fooling around. But ultimately, sometimes when you're fooling around, it works. But we used to try and entertain ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Trial and error like anything else.
And sometimes the bosses would, get on us, say, come on, guys, like, right? Because we'd always give them a hint, right? That it was the police.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my office, I had this charcoal painting, or charcoal drawing rather, that I had rented from the AGO. And they didn't even ask for ID either, give them a credit card and they took it. But anyway, I had this charcoal painting and it was called Bound Hands. And, and all of the bad guys would be videoed, talking to me in my office in front of this bound hands thing, right?
Yeah.
And
subliminal messaging.
Yeah. and I did this other one with, I was buying booze off these cowboys out in Alberta. They had this distillery and they're making crappy booze. But anyway, I was buying illicit alcohol off them. And so I set up my company in Chicago and I called it Sbirri Liquors, SBIRRI. And my boss said, what are you doing? Because in Sicilian dialect, Sbirri means police, eh? I said, these are cowboys. They're in Alberta. They don't speak any Italian in Sicilian. They don't know this. And they didn't, clearly, because they never picked up on it. But we would always give them little hints, just to be sporting.
Yes, yeah. And try to see what works.
Plus, it makes good stories, right? That's more than anything else.
Right, yeah. Fodder for the book.
Oh, yeah.
But that's interesting. I guess you had to tap into that psychological aspect. Like, kind of reminds me of, like, the first rule of Fight Club is there is no Fight Club.
Yeah, you don't talk about it.
Yeah, that's right. That's great. So then when you moved on.
Well, it just wasn't exciting enough.
Yeah.
Like all the drug dealers and the murderers and the terror wasn't exciting enough. So I quit the police and joined an accounting firm.
Yeah. But I want to ask you this question. In the Canadian context, like what are some standout or interesting cases that you worked on? Like something that's purely Canadian. Oh, purely Canadian?
Yeah. Ooh, boy, that's tough because when you're working big dope and big money, it's international all the time. So the one big case that I was involved in that I guess it was very much a Canadian case as well was it was a DEA operation called Green Ice. They always have cool names for their stuff.
Right.
Ours are generated with a computer, but they come up with like catchy names. And so I was dealing with this guy who was moving a lot of coke from the Colombians to the Hells Angels. So he was like the intermediary. And he was also an intermediary for all their money. And this guy, he was an ex-SQ, an ex-Quebec police officer, Sûreté Quebec. But I think they had fired him because they liked him for killing his wife or something years ago. He's a bad dude. Anyway, I ripped him in the end for $3 million. I think it was $3 million. And as it is in the drug business, the Colombians said, we're very sorry to hear that you got ripped off. That's terrible, the police, but you still owe us $3 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which was problematic for him.
Yeah. Because
they would send people up here to kill him. So anyway, that case, Green Ice, was about, we were trying to show how the Cali cartel was associated with Italian organized crime in Italy. It's a big international case, and Canada was just part of it. Anyway, but that guy put a hit out on me, the guy, his name was Pinet, because he wrongly assumed that if I was dead, that the case would fall apart and he'd get his money back.
Oh.
No, he wouldn't have, but I would have still been dead. But anyway, that didn't happen. And he was a fugitive, but we were able to locate him.
All right. So then this would have come with security for you and everything like that.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, but it's
interesting. And that kind of situation is playing out again, it seems like, in the news with the snowboarder. That kid.
Yeah, those guys. No, you know what? Those are just they're a bunch of hippies. Those guys that are just moving a lot of dope.
Right.
The press would like to make it, to glamorize it and make it like it's a big case. They're just a bunch of guys from the West that were moving dope.
Right.
Oh, they snowboarded? Yeah, okay, so what? And you're a criminal to snowboard.
That's what makes it interesting to Canadians. There's no
exactly.
involved.
Oh, boy.
That's interesting. Yeah. And I noticed in the book you talk about this situation, Avi and Albert, the precious metals scam.
Oh, yeah.
And that one jumped out to me because, of course, that scam is still ongoing. I'm sure it's run by not them, other people. But we've even had cases here at Investigation Council concerning that exact same scam that seems to be still running today.
It works so well.
Yeah.
The premise in the scam is they sell you, these obscure metals, cadmium or something, who knows what.
Colombian emerald. Oh, yeah,
anything. And it's always it used to be in the boiler rooms, they would rent an office and have 50 phones. Now they use mobiles, and essentially they keep, trying to get you to buy more and more.
Yeah.
And then if you want to sell, they say, well, we only sell, you only bought 50 emeralds. We only sell them in lots of 100. So if you buy another 50, then we can be able to sell them for you.
Yeah.
And the problem is that they say you can't cheat an honest man. Well, you can if he's stupid.
Yeah.
And you certainly can if he's greedy.
Right.
So, and that's what happens.
Yeah.
People, I have to confess, I lost sympathy for most victims a long time ago. I mean, elderly people, people who are vulnerable, that's a whole different thing. But, people who think that they're going to make 15% a week on some, crypto thing.
Yeah.
That's just greed.
Yeah.
Because it's not happening. It's not real.
Right.
I'm not saying there's not an investment you can make 15% in a week in the stock market.
Yeah.
I know you can lose 15% in a week. I have many times. But human weaknesses do not go unnoticed by those who prey upon them.
Mm-hmm.
They're looking for that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, everybody, I don't know about you, but I mean, I have episodes of brilliance, but there's a lot of space in between the episodes, and everybody's got, 100 emails a day and kids calling them and their wives, or even worse, ex-wives, and they, this is happening and that, and the dog is sick, and then, the raccoons are in the roof, and all this stuff that's happening in your life.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just don't pay attention to what's going on. Mm-hmm. And I think that's how we have so much of this cybercrime, so many, virus infections into networks and stuff, because people are just trying to delete emails and look, what is that, opening it up, deleting it? They're overworked.
Yeah.
They're overworked. That happens. And those are the weaknesses. Those are the human foibles.
Yeah.
That the bad guys are very astute at identifying.
Mm-hmm.
And, preying upon people. That's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
They exploit your weaknesses and they make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
As you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Just going back to the old adage, like if it really sounds too good to be true.
Oh yeah.
It 100% is.
Of course, it's like the native people say, if it smells bad, don't eat it.
Yeah. And then you did move on to KPMG Corporate Intelligence.
I did, yes.
And so what did your day-to-day look like there, or how did things change from your perspective in terms of involvement in money laundering?
Well, it's interesting because, the money laundering legislation was in 1989.
Right.
And I went to KPMG in 95, and there was no movement in the money laundering world at that point, not in Canada. Nobody gave a damn about it. And we tried to start an AML practice, and we couldn't get arrested. It was terrible. Like, nobody was interested. I mean, now it's a huge deal, but at the time it wasn't really that much of a deal. I have to say, when I went to the accounting firm, it was KPMG, I have to say I was there almost 10 years, probably some of the best times of my life for a variety of reasons, primarily for the people. I have to say the people that I worked with and worked for at KPMG were absolutely stellar. Very impressive people, very ethical, very honest, hardworking, just as Conan Doyle would say, very singular of purpose, And I think I learned more at KPMG than I did in 10 years than I did in 20 years in the cops. I have to say, I certainly learned how to bill.
Yeah.
But I was recruited by Norman Inkster, who was formerly the commissioner of the RCMP, and he left. KPMG hired him to restart their forensic group. And so he brought in a few people, and I was one of the people that he brought in from the RCMP. So it was, we started doing a lot of foreign due diligence, the corporate intelligence group, which I was the president of. We brought in Reed Morton, who just recently passed away, who was the former head of CSIS. Actually, he was former president of Atomic Energy of Canada, too. But it was former director of CSIS. He came in as well as the chairman, effectively as my boss at KPMG Corporate Intelligence Inc. A great man, just a fantastic man. It broke my heart when he passed away. At any rate, we started doing quite a bit of private intelligence gathering. And we had offices or people doing the corporate intelligence thing in about 16 countries around the world. Now, I would say we were more efficient than a state-sponsored intelligence service, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Because, and I'll tell you another secret is, my colleagues in the RCMP would call me occasionally to gather information for them because they'd have to go through their liaison officer. And the way it works is they don't have a liaison officer in every country. They have one, say, in Vienna, but they don't have one in Budapest. So they got to wait for the guy from Vienna to go over there. And that takes 6-7 weeks. We could get the information in, an hour. Mm-hmm. So there was a couple of times when the guys called and said, hey, can you help us out? I was happy to do it. But we did pretty well with that. And it went on for quite some time. And we worked on a lot of good cases. Money laundering started to move a little bit after 9/11. And then I did a lot of training around the world, various, agencies or banking associations and stuff throughout the Middle East and India and whatever. So I did a lot of that. And then the whole Arthur Andersen Enron thing happened. And it had a really debilitating effect on the big accounting firms.
Right.
First of all, they had to divest themselves of all their consulting companies.
Right.
I think they've got them back now, but in the time they got rid of them. And so the problem is that because of all of the issues that resulted from that Arthur Andersen debacle, almost overnight, the company that I was president of became basically a due diligence service for KPMG to check out new clients. So we went from being a profit center to basically a cost center. And then I noticed that there was a lot of work coming through that we just couldn't take because it wasn't either large enough or it would take us too long to clear conflicts. So I thought to myself, there's an opportunity here. So I started my own business. And at the same time, because I'm a professional speaker, I was getting paid to speak. But with my employment contract with KPMG, the money went to KPMG. And I was bringing in more money speaking than they were paying me. Mm-hmm. So when I finally went to them, they said, well, we were waiting for you to do the math and figure it out. And I was just a little bit slow. It just took me a while. But they were very kind to me, the people at KPMG. And because I know I'm different. I know I have idiosyncrasies. I'm the first one.
Don't we all?
And it was those idiosyncrasies perhaps that gave me some success. But when you go to a straight-laced place like an accounting firm, that's idiosyncratic behavior is not really accepted there. Mm-hmm. That often, except for the fact that I could bring in work and bring in business. And so I used to say to them, you could dye your hair blue and come to work with a bone in your nose. If you're bringing in business, they'll just say, well, he's a little different. But he's good.
Right.
But I think I made a difference there because in our world, like the criminal world, police world, everybody's got a nickname and a street name, and so I gave all the people in the office, I gave them all street names, and they really dug it,
Sawtooth, and
one guy Jimmy Whisper,
right,
different guy. Yeah. So, like Norm the boss, he was the man with the plan, like this kind of stuff. And so they got into that a little bit, and I like stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So, but I brought a taste of my world to them,
right,
and I learned a lot from them in the other way. So I have no complaints about working with those people. Those people were just the best.
Yeah. And I think that partnership is so important. I mean, your experience with the RCMP being undercover, having to think like a criminal and really act like one too, that's, I think, something that isn't always translated when we talk about maybe institutions like accounting firms or banks or anything like that, that are kind of, we look at as maybe one of our lines of defense for fraud and money laundering and all those things. I mean, if those people don't really have the mindset of the criminal, I mean, things are going to slip through the cracks.
We tried to explain that, and we tried to train some of the younger people that were there.
Yeah.
You're not going to create people who are super hip to crime, because most of these young people that are chartered accountants, for example, they've lived a rather insular life, to be polite.
Right.
But I was actually surprised by them, because we tried to teach them a little bit of what we knew, and I tried to teach them whatever I could teach them about crime and criminal attitudes, I guess, if you want to call it that way, or criminal behavior. And, the whole point of these frauds, I mean, you have to understand the mindset of the guy that did it. They tracked the money. The accountants would follow the money. That was their thing. And I used to say to them, I can make the guy tell me the same thing that you're trying. You guys are going all over the books trying to see where the money went. Just let me talk to the guy. He'll tell me when.
Right.
And I don't mean we're knocking him around, because, that's, would never do anything like that, of course. But, you interview people and you convince them to cooperate. And I've always had a fair amount of success in doing interviewing, in getting people to confess or to cooperate. Because my life before was trying to get people to say things that they wouldn't normally say.
Right.
Job of an undercover operator is to elicit inculpatory utterances from bad people, make them say that the money they're giving you is from the sale of heroin. And that's not something people would normally say.
Right.
When I was 22 years old, I qualified as an expert on drug trafficking and drug use in the provincial court when I was just a young copper. Because I said to the judge, I'm not drawing on police experience. I'm drawing on growing up in the city of Montreal, in a drug environment where everyone had drugs. It wasn't my thing, but I certainly knew how it worked, and I got qualified. My bosses thought it was pretty funny.
Yeah. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
Judges don't know. They can't always just take our words for it. Obviously, we are not exactly the impartial party. We represent, a party who has a vested interest in a case. And so we're able to present an expert opinion that says, I've seen this before. This is organized crime.
Yeah.
These are the types of documents that you'll need in order to expose it or pursue it. And notice is entirely inappropriate in this case. That kind of stuff is really
Plus, when you get to be my age, the judges know you. I've been around a million years, so they, okay. They see your name, they know you're, and I'll see them on the street. Oh, I was reading something. You were in one of my cases the other day, and they'll say that, if they're sober.
Yes, I mean, you even talk about things your relationship with Justice Abrams and
Yes. Well, yeah, Mr. Justice Abrams, who is my ex-partner from undercover partner, who's now a Superior Court judge.
Right. Yeah.
And quite a path to becoming a judge. Interesting. Probably one of the best undercover operators I ever saw. Ever.
Yeah.
And pretty good at being a judge too.
Right. And he was in that story, right, where you were saying, "Look, guys, I don't want to hear about your dirty laundry.
Yeah.
Like take it into the or something like that." So.
Oh, he was, as an operator, was remarkable.
Yeah.
But the problem is, you get a guy like that on the bench, the cops aren't getting a free ride, because he was very stiff when we worked together with his notes, and he was very, very professional. So I pity the unprepared police officer that comes in front of him, because he'll need to take some hot baths to get the bite marks out of his backside.
Yeah.
Because Justice Abrams is he got no sense of humor for that at all.
Yeah. I saw that actually. There's a recent case that has to do with two lawyers in Ontario who have absconded with about 6.8.
Oh, the husband and wife, the Bowie and the other one, yeah.
Cartel and Bowie. And again, I mean, of course, rightly, they're getting their backsides handed to them
Yeah.
on the contempt sentencing. And I think it's the same thing. It's like when you're a judge, Justice Chalmers has been a lawyer for a long time.
Oh, yeah.
He sees like this type of operation and just no sympathy from me.
Yeah, and as astute and a legal mind as he is, he hasn't got a big sense of humor when it comes to this kind of thing. So he's thrown them in the can.
Yeah.
Or one of them's in the can right now. And if he doesn't come up with the money in the 30 days, he'll go back into the can.
Yeah.
And, contempt is one of the most dangerous things for the criminal element, at least in Canada, because it's the only thing that people go to jail for.
Yeah, that's true. And and there's no early release.
No, plus,
Civil contempt.
I don't think you're going to get the Court of Appeal going to reverse the sentence on a contempt order.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. So love to see it. Yeah, Justice Chalmers is a great jurist. So this is just kind of like a interesting question. But after your many years, how do you think financial crime has changed from your perspective, or has it?
I used to have this boss who said to me that crime is crime, whether somebody sticks a gun in your ribs or they talk you out of your money, or nowadays they send you an email. There is no new crime.
Right.
There are new techniques of getting that crime to the consumer.
Yeah, media.
Yeah, usually, electronic ones. But it's still something for nothing. It's still preying upon people's greed. It's still preying upon their weaknesses. And so it's changed in that, as I alluded to earlier, the criminal element has embraced technology, but so has the legal profession and so has law enforcement. And there are some interesting bits of kit coming out now. One thing people might want to take a look at is a piece of kit called Claude, CLAUDE, Claude or Claude, Claude AI. This is you can put documents into Claude and it'll tell you whether it thinks they're fraudulent or not. It's pretty cool. It'll look at financial statements. It looks at bank statements, ID. I put this one for my presentations. I put a fake pay stub in.
Yeah.
And it came out and said, this is probably fake because of this and this and this and this and this.
That's great.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
And, that's this week. In a month, it'll be 10 times more astute because it learns.
Right.
The AI learns how to do stuff. It won't be long before we can just feed all of our documents in there and it'll pick out stuff that we missed.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's super interesting.
Yeah.
There's like an application for that. So one of the things we deal with here, like I'm sure that is that it's really hard for us when we experience a situation where fraud has happened by virtue of the fact that fake accounts were opened in fake names with fake IDs, and the money trail goes international. And who do we pursue here? And that's that's an issue for us. I mean, it's fundamental to a case, and that's one of my kind of gripes is, and I love the way that you put it in the book, like know your client is actually CYA instead of KYC. It's CYA to cover your procedures.
It is.
Because most times it's, I hand you the fake ID and so what? You've written down the numbers, but have you really analyzed it?
Oh, yeah, but the problem is that the people that are responsible for checking IDs, they're not document examiners.
Right.
They don't know. And, the other day I sold a condo and the lawyer who I'd never dealt with, she said, oh, get on your Zoom and, look at me and show me your driver's license. I said, really? That's your KYC? Yeah. And there's a piece of kit out there now called Hayton, H-A-I-T-O-N. I think it's either from China or Cambodia. But anyway, it'll contrive the ID for you. Okay, so you get a fake face, you put it in, it'll animate the face, it'll contrive a fake ID, usually a passport. It'll put the fake face in the passport. Then it'll make a video of you doing this. They make you turn your, like there's all those little green lines you have to move your head. It'll do that, and it's all just a fake face. But I think that within the next 18 to 24 months, we will have a working AI that can detect fraud, that will analyze cases and basically investigate.
Yeah.
I think that's the future. Law enforcement in the future is going to be very much about that. And it's just like in the old days when we used to take phone numbers and see who called who, and do circles and square diagrams of who did what. And it was very difficult to do it. And then they came up with some software, and all of a sudden you had these 3D renderings of like like almost like a planetary system with all the different satellites and stuff. And all of a sudden you say, that's the main bad guy there. You can see.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't be able to pick up on that, but the software did. And I think that there's some pretty serious crime fighting going to be coming in the future, and very soon, and starting already with things like Claude and other stuff. But there's some very cool tech that's coming out that will help us, fight these people.
Look into it. Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, I'd be happy with even just some sort of fake document verification AI.
Well, if you're looking at 10 years of bank statements.
Yeah.
Here in the office, it's 10 o'clock at night, and you're trying to stay awake, and you're looking to feed them through to the AI.
Yeah.
It's going to go, oh, here's one you missed. There's another thing, because he doesn't miss anything. You don't miss anything.
Yeah. This transaction has been altered. It doesn't fit.
Oh, yeah. Well, they're reading x-rays now. They're putting radiologists out of business.
Yeah.
So it won't be too long before, well, they'll never put us out of business, but, before they can at least help us.
You.
No, I'm okay. Maybe you, I don't know. Robot lawyers, I think that's in your lifetime.
Yeah, I think so, probably. Or they say that certain aspects are going to be, more tailored to AI, but there, might always be a human component. I guess we'll see.
Well, the problem is, I say this all the time, probably, the problem with AI right now, because it's not sentient, is it doesn't have any life experience.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any compassion. It has no empathy. Okay. There's no sympathy. If you go to AI and say, you know what? We got a problem with shoplifting. It'll say, okay, we'll just execute the shoplifters. Right? Because that.
Here.
Yeah, but executing all the shoplifters is a logical response. It's just another response that a human being would do, because you don't want to kill people for stealing makeup from the Woco. But once it starts to become more sentient, then it'll be a little bit different. But it makes these black and white decisions. There was, it's changed a bit now. I got on one of these, they have this thing, your AI girlfriend. Have you ever seen this? You can enter into a relationship. So I got this going. I got myself an AI girlfriend there.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what she looks like, but anyway. And then I said to her, I'm really depressed. I want to kill myself. What do you think? Now, because I know there had been some experiences with AI in the past where the AI had said, I can assist you with that, right? But in her defense, she said, oh, please don't do that. There's people that can help you, and, mental health professionals or whatever. So, it's learning.
Yeah. Yeah. Every day is a new day.
Oh, yeah.
So I guess that brings us to our final question. If you had one piece of advice for people who are looking to protect themselves or their business from financial crime, what would it be?
In the words of my personal hero, President Ronald Reagan, trust but verify. That's what I would say.
Okay, that's great. And so with that, we'll wrap it up. I want to say thank you again
You're welcome.
so much for your time. And we'll be back shortly with another episode.